The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. More than 300 species had joined this great alliance, sharing trade, technology, and peace across countless worlds. When humanity first reached the stars 60 years ago, they were welcomed as a minor member. The older species looked at humans the way adults look at children. They were too young, too emotional, and too primitive to matter much. Ambassador Linda Morrison had spent 30 years trying to change that view. She was 63 years old, with silver hair and tired eyes. She had dedicated her entire life to building friendships between Earth and the alien species of the Concord. She believed that patience and kindness would eventually earn humanity a place of respect among the stars. Today, standing in the Great Hall of the Concord Assembly on the station world of Vitheris Prime, she realized she had been wrong. The hall was enormous. Built to hold delegates from hundreds of worlds, strange creatures filled the seats around her. Some had wings. Some had tentacles. Some were made of living crystal or flowing liquid. Their voices filled the air in dozens of languages while translation devices hummed quietly, turning everything into words she could understand. High Speaker Ketzer stood at the center of the chamber. He was a Cathari, an insect-like creature nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and wings that shimmered like oil on water. His species had led the Concord for the past 1,000 years, and they did not like humanity. "The motion carries," Ketzer announced, his mandibles clicking together in satisfaction. "The human colony on Kepler 442b is hereby dissolved. All human settlers will be moved to approved Concord territories. Their resources and buildings will be given to species that deserve them." Linda felt her hand shake, but she kept her voice calm. "Hi, Speaker. There are 4 million people living on that world. They have been there for 22 years. They have built cities, farms, schools. They have raised families there. You cannot simply take it away." "We can," Ketzer replied. "And we have. The Concord has spoken." This was the 5th human colony the Concord had voted to take in 3 years. First, a mining outpost. Then, a research station. Then a small farming settlement. Each time they gave different reasons, but Linda could see the pattern clearly. Humanity was being pushed back, squeezed smaller, was treated like unwanted guests who had stayed too long. She looked around the assembly hall, searching for friendly faces. The Vethener delegates, an ancient species who had once been kind to humans, refused to meet her eyes. The Aurelians, who had traded with Earth for decades, sat in uncomfortable silence. Even the commonality of minds, a species known for fairness and justice, had voted against humanity. "May I ask why?" Linda said, keeping her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "What has Kepler 4 to be done wrong?" Ketzer waved one of his forearms dismissively. "The colony is too close to contested space. It creates security problems. The Concord has decided. 50 years ago, the Vethener wanted to build in that same area. The Concord said the location was perfectly safe then." A wave of discomfort passed through the assembly. Ketzer's wings buzzed with irritation, a sign of anger among his kind. Humanity would do well to remember its place. "You are young. You are small. The Concord has been generous in allowing you any colonies at all." Linda Morrison had been a diplomat for 3 decades. She had smiled through insults. She had stayed calm during threats. She had built agreements from nothing through patience and skill. She had believed, truly believed, that being good and reasonable would eventually make things better. She was tired of believing. "I will tell Earth what the Concord has decided," she said, her voice flat and cold. "You will have our response within 1 standard cycle." She turned and walked out of the Great Hall, leaving 12,000 years of galactic politics behind her. On Earth, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Daniel Hayes sat in a secure room and watched Linda's report on a screen. He was 58 years old, a former naval officer with gray at his temples and worry lines around his eyes. The world he led was growing more afraid every day. Around the table sat his most trusted advisors. Admiral Catherine Price commanded the United Earth Defense Force. She was 61, as tough as steel, and she had been warning about this day for years. Secretary of State Marcus Webb was a diplomat like Linda, a man who believed in talking rather than fighting. "They are not going to stop," Admiral Price said. "Every year they push harder. Every year we lose more ground. If we do not act now, there will be nothing left to defend." Marcus Webb shook his head. "War with the Concord is suicide. They have 300 member species. Their combined fleet is 1,000 times larger than ours." "Numbers are not everything," Price replied. "They are when the numbers are this bad." President Hayes held up his hand for silence. On the screen, Linda Morrison looked exhausted. But there was something else in her eyes now. "Something that looked like grief," Linda Hayes said. "What do you think?" She was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I have spent my entire career trying to make this work, trying to prove that we could be good partners. I thought if we were patient enough, kind enough, they would eventually see us as equals. And now? Now I think they never will. We are not partners to them. We are not even pets. We are insects. And they are going to keep stepping on us until there is nothing left." Hayes nodded slowly. He looked around the room at his advisors. The weight of the decision pressed down on all of them like a physical force. "How long have we been preparing?" he asked Admiral Price. 60 years, she answered. "Since the day we joined the Concord, we always knew this might happen." "And are we ready?" Price paused before answering. "We will never be ready enough. But we are more ready than they think." Hayes stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the mountains stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond those mountains, 8 billion people lived their lives, unaware that everything was about to change. "They gave us no choice," he said quietly. "We tried everything else. We were patient. We were reasonable. We followed their rules and accepted their insults. And they still treat us like nothing." He turned back to face his advisors. "Prepare the declaration. It is time the galaxy learned what happens when you push humanity too far." Marcus Webb looked pale. "Mr. President, are you sure about this?" "No," Hayes admitted. "But I am sure about what happens if we do nothing. We die slowly with our heads bowed, begging for scraps from species who despise us. I will not let that happen. Not while I am president. Not while there is still breath in my body." Admiral Price stood up straighter, something like hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in years. "I will begin preparations immediately, sir." "Do it," Hayes said. "And may God forgive us for what we are about to do." The declaration of war was sent across every communication channel in known space. It was translated into 400 languages and delivered at the same moment to every member of the Galactic Concord. Trillions of beings across thousands of worlds stopped what they were doing and listened. President Daniel Hayes stood in a simple room with the flag of United, to Earth behind him. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke words that would change the course of history. "Act to the member species of the Galactic Concord. For 60 years, humanity has tried to live peacefully among the stars. We followed your laws. We respected your traditions. We accepted decisions that were unfair and unjust, hoping that patience and good behavior would eventually be rewarded. We were wrong. In the past 3 years, the Concord has voted to take away 5 human colonies. 4 million of our people are being forced from their homes. Our ships are attacked. Our traders are cheated. Our diplomats are ignored. And through all of this, we have been told to remember our place. We remember our place. Our place is wherever we choose to stand. As of this moment, the United Earth government declares war against the Galactic Concord and all member species that have hurt human settlements and citizens. We do not make this decision easily. We know what we face. We know the odds. By every reasonable calculation, we should lose. But humanity has never been reasonable. We do not start wars. But when wars are forced upon us, we finish them. We finished them against each other for 10,000 years before we learned to be better. Now we will finish this one. To those species who have been neutral or friendly to humanity, we offer this. Stand aside. This is not your fight. But if you choose to stand with those who have wronged us, you will share their fate. To the Concord leadership, you had 60 years to treat us as equals. You chose not to. That choice has consequences. Humanity is coming, and we are not going to stop. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. On Vitheris's prime, high speaker, Ketzer watched the recording in his private chambers and made the clicking sound that meant laughter among his people. They declare war on the entire Concord? With what? Their tiny fleet of patrol ships? His assistant, a younger Kethvari named Shental, seemed less certain. High speaker, the humans have been known to do unexpected things. Unexpected is not the same as dangerous. Their entire military could not capture a single Concord core world. This is theater. They are trying to scare us into giving them what they want. And if they are serious... Ketzar made a dismissive gesture with two of his arms. Then they will be crushed, and we will finally be rid of this annoying species. Either way, the problem solves itself. But not everyone in the Concord was so confident. On the Vethanar homeworld, Elder Counselor Vethros studied the Human Declaration with growing worry. The Vethanar were one of the oldest species in the Concord, and they had seen empires rise and fall over thousands of years. They are not bluffing, Vethros said to her advisors. I have watched the transmission many times. The human leader shows no signs of lying. He believes every word he says. Belief does not equal ability, one of her advisors pointed out. It's true, but there is something about humans that concerns me. She pulled up files of human history. Records that had been collected but rarely studied. They fought among themselves for most of their existence. Constant war, generation after generation. Yet they did not destroy themselves. They survived. They became unified. They reached the stars. Many species have violent histories. Not like this. Vethros pointed to a particular section of the records. They invented weapons that could destroy their entire civilization. Nuclear bombs powerful enough to end all life on their planet. And then they lived with those weapons for over a century without using them again. They walked to the edge of extinction and chose to step back. That could be luck, perhaps, but I do not wish to bet our future on it. While the politicians talked, humanity was already moving. In the Sol system, something strange was happening. Human colonies across the galaxy began to empty. Settlers packed their belongings and boarded transport ships. Research stations were shut down. Mining operations stopped. Within weeks, human space became a ghost town, empty of people and stripped of anything valuable. The Concord noticed this and felt even more confident. The humans were running away. They had made their grand speech and then fled like frightened animals. The war would be over before it truly began. Admiral Catherine Price stood in a command center above Mars, watching construction drones work on ships that had been secretly built for decades. These were not the old patrol vessels that the Concord had seen. These were something new, something the galaxy had never encountered. How long until the Constellation fleet is ready? She asked. Commander Samuel Drake checked his screens. The first 12 ships will be operational in 3 months. The full 60 ships within a year. We do not have a year. No, ma'am. We do not. Price nodded grimly. The Constellation fleet was humanity's secret project. These ships were not designed to match Concord vessels. They were designed to surpass them in ways the Concord could not imagine. Jump drives that could cross a star system in minutes instead of hours. Weapons that could break through shields that had protected alien warships for centuries. Armor that could survive hits from weapons that had destroyed every other ship they had ever touched. But even this was not enough to win a normal war. Humanity was not planning to fight a normal war. Begin Operation Prometheus, Price ordered, and send word to all remaining colonies. It is time to come home. Back on Earth, the mood was tense, but determined. People who had spent their lives arguing about politics and borders now came together with a single purpose. Factories that had made consumer goods switched to producing military supplies. Scientists who had studied medicine and agriculture turned their minds to weapons and defense. Young people who had dreamed of peaceful careers volunteered for military service. President Hayes visited one of these recruitment centers in Chicago. He watched young men and women line up to sign their names. Knowing that many of them might not survive what was coming, a young woman named Grace, barely 20 years old, stood at attention when she saw him. "Mr. President," she said, "I want you to know that I am not afraid." Hayes looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. The same determination he had seen in millions of faces across the planet. "You should be afraid," he said honestly. "War is terrible. People will die. Friends will be lost." "I know," Grace replied. "But some things are worth being afraid for. We spent 60 years asking them to treat us fairly. They refused. Now we will make them understand that humans do not beg." Hayes put his hand on her shoulder. "That is exactly right. We do not beg. We do not surrender. And we do not forgive those who try to destroy us." He walked away, feeling the weight of leadership more heavily than ever. These young people were willing to fight and die for humanity's future. He owed it to them to give them the best chance possible. In his mind, the pieces of the plan were falling into place. The evacuation of the colonies, the secret fleet, the technologies that the Concorde had never suspected, and the final weapon, the one that would change everything. Waiting in the heart of the sun itself, the Concorde thought they understood humanity. They thought humans were weak, primitive, easily crushed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first 6 weeks passed in preparation and silence. The Concorde assembled its response slowly, weighed down by centuries of bureaucracy. Different species argued about who should lead and who should contribute what. By the time they finally organized a fleet to respond to humanity's declaration, the trap was already set. Humanity was ready, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Concorde took 9 weeks to organize its response to humanity's declaration of war. Different species argued about strategy, leadership, and resources. Committees met and debated while paperwork moved slowly through ancient systems. This was how the Concorde had always done things. This was why it took them so long. When the first Concorde task force finally arrived at the edges of human space, they found nothing. Empty stations floated in the darkness. Abandoned colonies sat silent on lifeless worlds. Not a single human ship appeared on their sensors. Fleet. Commander Orvix of the Kethvari stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and stared at his sensor screens in confusion. Where are they? Where are the humans? His tactical officers studied the data carefully. They appear to have left, Commander. All colonies show no life signs. All stations have been powered down. They ran away. They declared war and then ran away. It would seem so, Commander. Orvex made a sound of disgust. Cowards. They made their grand speech and then fled like prey animals. Secure the abandoned territories. We will claim them for the Concorde and report our victory. The task force spread out across human space, taking control of empty worlds and stations without any resistance. Reports were sent back to the Concorde Assembly. The human threat was already finished. They had surrendered without fighting. For 6 days. Everyone believed this was true. On the 7th day, the first Concorde supply convoy vanished. Commander Patricia Lang stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Silent Runner and watched her crew secure the captured Concorde vessels. The convoy had been 10 ships, 8 cargo carriers filled with supplies, and 2 escort frigates to protect them. The Silent Runner had appeared directly in front of them. Jumping out of nowhere using technology the Concorde did not understand before the alien ships could react. Their computer systems were overwhelmed by electronic attacks. Their weapons went offline. Their engines stopped. Their crews found themselves trapped on powerless ships, unable to fight back or call for help. Lang was 43 years old and had spent 20 years preparing for exactly this kind of mission. She was calm, professional, and utterly focused on her work. "What are they carrying?" she asked Lieutenant Nathan Cole. Check the captured ship's records. Military supplies, ammunition, spare parts for weapons, food for troops, enough to supply a fleet for 3 months, and the crews. About 2,000 personnel total. We have moved them to escape pods with enough supplies to survive for a few days. Lang nodded. Mark the location and leave a beacon. Someone will come looking for them eventually. They will be rescued. And the cargo? Take everything useful. Destroy the rest. Leave nothing they can use. This was Operation Prometheus. Not a direct battle, but a campaign of targeted attacks against Concord supply lines, communication stations, and isolated outposts. Strike hard, strike fast, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The Silent Runner was one of 12 human ships running similar operations across Concord space. By the end of the first week, they captured or destroyed over 50 Concord vessels, shut down communications across an entire region, and vanished back into the darkness of space. The Concord still had no idea where the attacks were coming from or how to stop them. On Vitheris Prime, the mood in the assembly had shifted from amusement to concern. 27 attacks in 14 days, the Aurelian delegate reported, his voice tight with worry. 61 ships destroyed or captured. For communication relay stations disabled. And we have not managed to stop a single human vessel. High Speaker Ketzer Swings buzzed with agitation. How is this possible? We have thousands of ships looking for them. The humans appear to be using some kind of faster-than-light travel that we do not understand. They arrive without warning, attack, and disappear before we can respond. Then figure out how they do it. Capture one of their ships. We have tried, High Speaker. Every battle ends the same way. Either they destroy our ships before we can react, or they vanish before we can catch them. Elder Counselor Vethros spoke carefully. I warned that we should not underestimate these creatures. They have been preparing for this for a very long time. It's preparing for what? Kethsar demanded. To be annoying? They cannot win a war like this. They can only delay what must happen. Can they not? Our supply lines are in chaos. 3 of our forward bases have been cut off from support. We have lost more ships in 2 weeks than we lost in the last 100 years of border conflicts. If this continues, we will not be able to fight effectively. Then make it stop. Find their base. Find their fleet. And destroy them. But finding humanity's fleet proved impossible. The jump drive technology that Earth had developed worked on principles that Concord scientists could not understand. Human ships could appear anywhere in the galaxy attack, and disappear before normal faster-than-light pursuit could even begin, and humanity used this advantage without mercy. Over the next 2 months, the attacks grew worse. Military convoys were ambushed. Research stations were destroyed. Shipyards were bombed. Communication networks were disrupted across vast regions of space. Nothing was destroyed that would force a direct battle, but the damage added up. The Concord economy began to suffer. Trade routes that had been safe for thousands of years became dangerous. The cost of shipping cargo went up dramatically as insurance companies refused to cover losses. Several member species quietly withdrew their ships from the joint fleet. Unwilling to risk their vessels in a war, they were not winning. Through all of this, humanity remained invisible. They struck from nowhere, caused destruction, and vanished like ghosts. The mighty Concord, which had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, could not catch a single human ship. On Earth, the mood was cautiously hopeful. The early stages of Operation Prometheus had succeeded beyond expectations. But Admiral Price knew this was only the beginning. Cannot keep this up forever, she told President Hayes during one of their regular briefings. Eventually they will adapt. They will find ways to protect their convoys. They will spread out their forces so we cannot target them. We have hurt them, but we have not beaten them. Then what is our next move? Price pulled up a star map, showing the Sol system. We wait. We let them think they understand our strategy. We let them believe they can counter it. And then we invite them to come to us. The trap. Yes, sir. Operation Helios. The weapon we have been building for 60 years. Studied the map, looking at the small markers representing installations scattered throughout the solar system. Weapons platforms on asteroids. Sensor stations on distant moons. And at the center, hidden in the blazing light of the sun itself, something that would change the rules of warfare forever. Will it work? Honestly, I do not know. It has never been tested in actual combat. But our scientists are confident and we have no better options." Hayes was silent for a long moment. Outside his window, the lights of cities stretched across the night side of Earth. 8 billion people. Living their lives, trusting their leaders to keep them safe. "The Concord will come for Earth eventually," he said. "They have to. They cannot let our attacks continue." "Yes, sir. Our intelligence suggests they are already planning a massive assault. They will gather the largest fleet in their history and try to destroy us in one overwhelming attack. And when they arrive, they will find our surprise waiting for them. Right. When they arrive, they will learn what happens when you corner humanity. We are most dangerous when we have no way to retreat." Far across the galaxy, the Concord was indeed planning its response. The attacks on supply lines had embarrassed them. The inability to catch human ships had humiliated them. Now they would end this war once and for all. They would send everything they had to Earth and burn humanity's homeworld to ash. Without their home, the human raiders would have nowhere to return. They would wither and die in the cold darkness between stars. It seemed like a perfect plan. It would prove to be their greatest mistake. 6 months into the war, the Concord Assembly made a decision that would prove to be a terrible mistake. High Speaker Kethser addressed the gathered delegates with anger burning in his compound eyes. "We cannot continue chasing shadows. The humans want us to waste our resources hunting their raiders while they hide like insects in the walls. We will not play their game any longer. What do you suggest?" Elder Counselor Vethros asked, already worried about the answer. "We strike at their heart, Sol. Earth. We gather the largest fleet in Concord history and burn their homeworld to ashes. Without Earth, the human raiders will have nowhere to go home to. They will die alone in the darkness of space." Many delegates nodded in agreement. They had lost ships to human attacks. They had lost money and resources. The desire for revenge was strong, and the logic seemed simple. Destroy the source of the problem, and the problem goes away. Vethros raised a cautionary hand. "We do not know what defenses Earth might have. The humans have shown technologies we did not expect. A direct attack could be expensive." "Expensive?" Kethser's wings spread wide in a display of dominance. "We will send 10,000 ships. The humans have maybe 100 at most. No defense they could build would stop such a force. This war ends at Earth." The motion passed with overwhelming support. The Concord would crush humanity once and for all. The Armada took 3 months to assemble. Ships from over 200 species gathered at a meeting point in neutral space. 10,300 vessels, from small frigates to massive warships the size of cities, crewed by more than 15 million beings from across the galaxy. It was the largest military force ever assembled in Concord. History Admiral Catherine Price received the intelligence report with grim satisfaction. They were coming, just as she had predicted. Just as humanity had planned, she stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Harbinger, flagship of humanity's defense fleet, orbiting high above the planet that had given birth to their species. Around her, 67 ships waited in formation. The Constellation Fleet, humanity's secret weapon, was finally revealed to the universe. Commander Samuel Drake looked at the incoming sensor data. 67 ships against 10,000. The numbers are not in our favor. "The numbers have never been in our favor," Price replied. "But we are not fighting by their rules." She pulled up a display showing Earth and the space around it. But the display also showed something else. Hundreds of hidden installations scattered throughout the solar system. Weapons platforms buried in asteroids. Sensor stations hidden on distant moons. And at the center of it all, a structure orbiting close to the sun itself, invisible against the star's blazing light. "Operation Helios is ready." "Yes, ma'am. It has been ready for 3 years." Price nodded slowly. The Concord thought they understood human technology. They had seen the jump drives and the advanced weapons. They thought those were humanity's best secrets. They were very wrong. The Concord. Armada entered the Sol system expecting an easy victory. They found something completely different. The first wave of 500 ships jumped into normal space at the outer edge of the system. This was standard procedure, a safe distance to assess the situation before moving closer. They appeared, began scanning the area, and prepared to advance toward Earth. And then something impossible happened. The sun flickered, not in a way that eyes could see, but to sensors, to navigation computers, to the delicate instruments that guided faster than light travel. The sun suddenly became impossible to read correctly, fleet. Admiral Torak stood on the bridge of his command ship and watched his displays fill with static. What is happening? Why are our sensors failing? His science officer worked desperately at her console. It is not failure, Admiral. The humans have done something to their star. Some kind of interference is being broadcast across the entire system. Our instruments cannot function properly. Then fix them. We do not need perfect sensors to find a planet? Admiral, you do not understand? Without accurate sensor data, we cannot calculate jump coordinates inside the system. If we try to use faster-than-light travel, we could end up inside a planet, or inside the sun. Torax felt a chill run through him despite the warmth of the bridge. You are saying we cannot use FTL? Not safely. We would have to travel through the system using normal engines. How long would it take to reach Earth at normal speed? From our current position, about 4 months. The Armada had supplies for maybe 2 weeks of active combat. They had expected to jump directly to Earth, destroy it, and go home. Nobody had planned for a 4-month journey. The attacks began before they could process this information. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, their special jump drives unaffected by whatever was interfering with Concorde systems. They came in groups of 5 or 6, striking at supply ships and command vessels with perfect accuracy, then vanishing before the massive Concorde fleet could respond in the first day alone. The Concorde lost 200 ships. They did not destroy a single human vessel. They can still jump, Torax realized with growing horror. They can move freely while we are trapped. Their technology must work on different principles. They built their system around this interference. They planned for this. Then we push forward. We advance at maximum speed. Eventually, we will reach Earth and destroy it. It was a reasonable plan. Even with losses, the Concorde still had overwhelming numbers. If they could just reach Earth, they could still win. But humanity had been preparing for 60 years. The journey to Earth became a nightmare. Human ships attacked constantly, day and night, without stopping. They targeted engines, forcing damaged ships to fall behind. They targeted weapons, reducing the fleet's firepower. They targeted the sections where crews slept and ate, destroying morale, and they targeted commanders. Fleet Admiral Torax died on the 14th day when a human missile somehow passed through his flagship's shields and exploded directly under the bridge. His replacement lasted 8 days before her ship was destroyed, and she was taken prisoner. The 3rd Fleet commander ordered a retreat, only to discover that retreating through the interference field was just as dangerous as advancing. The Concorde Armada was trapped. They could not go forward quickly. They could not go back safely. And every day, more ships were destroyed. On the Harbinger, Admiral Price watched the reports come in with grim determination. She felt no joy in the destruction, only the cold necessity of survival. How many have we lost? She asked. 12 ships destroyed, 8 damaged, but still fighting. 47 fully operational. Against the thousands still remaining in the Concorde fleet, it was nothing. But those thousands were bleeding. Every day, their numbers dropped. Every day, their supplies ran lower. Every day, more crews lost hope. President Hayes contacted her through a secure channel. How long can we keep this up? As long as necessary, sir. They are trapped, and we are not. Time is on our side. Some of my advisors think we should offer them a way out. Let them retreat. Show mercy. Price was quiet for a moment. That is your decision, Mr. President. But I would remind you that they came here to burn our world to ashes. They planned to kill 8 billion people, including every child on the planet. Mercy is a luxury we cannot afford until they are no longer a threat. Nodded slowly. Continue the operation, Admiral. Make them understand what they have done. The weeks passed. The mighty Concorde Armada, 10,000 ships strong, slowly died in the cold darkness of space. They could not catch the human ships. They could not escape the trap. They could only watch their numbers shrink and their hopes fade. On the 47th day, with fewer than 4,000 ships still capable of fighting, the surviving Concorde commanders did something that had never happened in 12,000 years of galactic history. They requested a ceasefire. They asked for terms of surrender. The greatest military force ever assembled had been broken without reaching its target. Nearly 5 million beings were dead, injured, or captured. And humanity, the young species that everyone had dismissed as primitive and weak, had won. Admiral Price allowed herself one moment of quiet relief before responding to the ceasefire request. The war was not over yet, but for the first time since it began, she truly believed humanity would survive. Surrender negotiations took place on a station, built quickly by human engineers in neutral space between the trapped Concorde fleet and Earth. The station was designed to hold delegates from many species, with different rooms set to different temperatures and atmospheres so that everyone could breathe comfortably. Representatives from 47 Concorde species gathered on one side of a large meeting room. They looked tired, defeated, and confused. Many of them had never imagined this moment could happen. The Concorde had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had crushed rebellions and absorbed empires. They had never lost, until now. High Speaker Ketzer was not present. He had been called back to his homeworld in disgrace and was facing charges of terrible leadership. The war had been his idea. The defeat was his responsibility. Elder Counselor Vethros spoke for the Concorde instead. She was very old, even by the standards of her long-lived species, and she had seen many things in her lifetime. But she had never seen anything like this. On the other side of the table sat President Daniel Hayes, Ambassador Linda Morrison, and Admiral Catherine Price. They looked tired too, but there was something else in their eyes. Not triumph or gloating. Something quieter and more complicated. Vethros spoke first. "We underestimated you. That was our mistake." Hayes nodded. It was. "But I did not come here to make you feel bad about your failure. I came here to end this war and build something better. Better. The Concorde has existed for 12,000 years. In that time, you have kept peace between hundreds of species. You have helped trade flow across the galaxy. You have solved problems that would have destroyed younger civilizations. That is valuable. We do not want to destroy it." Vethros blinked her large eyes slowly, a sign of surprise among her people. "Then what do you want?" "Equality. Full membership in the Concorde for humanity, with all the rights and deep protections that other species have. No more taking our colonies. No more attacking our ships. No more treating us like we do not matter. And if we refuse, then we continue the war. We have enough supplies to keep fighting for years. Do you?" The answer was clearly no. The Concorde economy was already suffering badly. Several member species had already sent messages to Earth asking to make separate peace agreements. The alliance that had held the galaxy together for so long was falling apart. "Some will call this surrender," Vethros said quietly. "Call it whatever makes you comfortable. We call it the beginning of a new relationship." The discussions continued for 3 days. There were arguments about details, disagreements about specific terms, moments when it seemed like everything might fall apart. But in the end, the Treaty of Soul was signed by representatives of 212 species. Humanity was granted full Concorde membership with all rights and protections. All colonies that had been taken were returned, with payment for the damage done. A new position was created on the Concorde Council, specifically to make sure human interests were considered in major decisions. In exchange, humanity agreed to share some of their technologies with the Concorde. The interference field that had trapped the Armada would be used to create defensive systems around important Concorde worlds, making them almost impossible to attack. The jump drive technology would be studied and eventually shared. Changing how all species traveled between stars, it was by any measure a generous peace. The Concorde had expected harsh demands. They had expected humanity to take territory, demand huge payments, humiliate them publicly. Instead, they received a hand extended in friendship. Many species did not understand why. 6 months after the treaty was signed, Elder Counselor Vethros asked for a private meeting with Ambassador Linda Morrison. They met on Vetheris Prime, in the same great hall, where the votes to destroy human colonies had once been held. "I have a question," Vetheris said. "One that has bothered me since the war ended." "Ask." "You could have destroyed us. Your technology, your strategies, your determination. If you had wanted to, you could have brought the entire Concord down. Why did you not?" Morrison was quiet for a long time. She looked older than she had before the war, with more gray in her hair and deeper lines around her eyes. But there was also a peace in her expression that had not been there before. "Because that is not who we want to be," she finally answered. "We have been conquerors before, back on Earth. We built empires and tore them down. We committed terrible acts in the name of victory. And we learned eventually that winning is not worth much if you lose yourself along the way. So you fought for equality, not power. We fought because you left us no choice, because you would not listen to words, so we had to speak in a language you understood. But we stopped fighting the moment you were willing to treat us as equals. That was always the goal. Not to rule the galaxy, just to have our place in it." Vethros thought about this for a long time. In her many years, she had met representatives from hundreds of species. She had watched civilizations grow and collapse, wars begin and end. But she had never met a species quite like humanity. "We were wrong about you," she said at last. "I hope you will give us the chance to learn better." Morrison smiled, the first real smile she had worn in years. "That is all we ever wanted." 100 years passed. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible to the beings who had voted to dissolve those first human colonies. Humanity had become one of the most important species in the Concord, not through force or threats, but through cooperation and creativity. Human scientists worked alongside Vethener researchers, solving problems that had confused the galaxy for centuries. Human traders built connections between species that had never worked together before. Human diplomats helped end conflicts that had burned for generations. The interference field technology that had won the war was now protecting dozens of worlds across the Concord. No species could threaten another with military force the way the Concord had once threatened humanity. Peace was not just a hope anymore. It was enforced by the laws of physics and in the Great Hall of the Assembly, where Linda Morrison had once stood alone against an alliance that wanted to crush her people. A new generation of human ambassadors took their seats among equals. Ambassador Grace Chen, granddaughter of one of the first volunteers who had signed up when war was declared, addressed the Assembly on the 100th anniversary of the Treaty of Seoul. "A century ago, my species stood at a crossroads. We could have accepted our fate, allowed ourselves to be slowly pushed into extinction, disappeared from history without anyone noticing or caring. We chose to fight instead. But fighting was never the point. Winning was never the point. The point was to prove that we deserved to be here, that we had something valuable to offer, that we were not insects to be stepped on, but partners to be respected. Today I look around this hall and I see that proof everywhere. Vethener and human scientists curing diseases together. Aurelian and human traders building prosperity across 100 worlds. Species that barely spoke to each other a century ago, now working side by side because humanity showed them how. We crossed a line once. The galaxy pushed us until we broke, until we had no choice but to push back. But we did not push back to destroy. We pushed back to build. And look at what we have built together." She paused, looking around the vast chamber at delegates from 300 species, all listening in silence. "The next century will bring new challenges, new problems that no one species can solve alone. But I believe we will face them together as partners, as friends, as equals. Because that is what the galaxy has become. Not because we forced it, but because we showed what was possible when you give everyone a fair chance." The assembly erupted in applause, a sound made by hundreds of different limbs and vocal systems, unified in approval in the observation gallery above. An old Vethener watched with eyes that had seen 12,000 years of history. She was Vethris, still alive despite her great age. And she was thinking about the young species that had once been dismissed as primitive pests. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They had been given every reason to hate and destroy. And instead, they had chosen to build something better. Perhaps, she thought, that was what made them truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their technology, but their stubborn, unreasonable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The galaxy had crossed a line when it tried to crush humanity. And humanity had responded by lifting everyone up. It was, she decided, the most human thing possible.